Hello everyone, Steve at Isopod Factory. Pulling the late Monday, catching up some of the numerous orders we have from the last month or so we've been able to ship due to the extremely stupid frigid cold that is now finally starting to let up some. So we are working hard to get all of the orders out that have been sitting here for a while, and again want to thank everyone we've reached out to that has been kind, understanding, and patient, so we can get your Isopod shipped out safely so they can arrive happy and, of course, alive, which is the goal. So we're going to pack an order here and just go through the steps to show you guys how we gauge every order as far as the tools we use to ship to give them the best chance of arriving safe and sound. So for this order, we have is for Rocio, hopefully I'm saying that right, who's in New Jersey. So when we get an order, the first thing we do, of course, is look at the weather, both our local weather and the weather of the destination, because both places have to be considered when you pack a shipment in terms of the items you use, heat packs, cool packs, foam, etc. So our orders do follow a general flow process, but of course, if something's going, let's say, to the deep south, where it's pretty much always warm, or not cold like it is up here in the Midwest, compared to, say, an order that's going, well, maybe Michigan, it's going to be packed a certain way to accommodate the weather that's expected to be in that area when they arrive. So in this case, we use Weather Underground. That is our go-to tool to look at the forecast. So taking the phone off the mount for a moment here. I've already got the information pulled up, so as you'll see, we're Monday night here, so we know this is going to be a 2-day shipment from our location, so I'm looking at the weather between today and Thursday at our location, because when it dispatches, it's going to be in our area at least for a day, maybe 2, before it actually gets there. So the highs and the lows are in very acceptable ranges. These are slightly chilly, but ideal. They're not freezing or below freezing. But, so this is us in Dayton, Ohio. If we flip over to Rocio in New Jersey, they're a little bit chillier than we are. So our cutoff, we try to keep it about freezing. It may be slightly below freezing. We may still ship depending, but generally, if temperatures are at least freezing or above, we can usually work with that when it's 2-day shipments. Again, if it's going out west, which for us is a longer transit time with standard shipping, that can change how our whole flow process works. But regardless, the temperature ranges here in New Jersey where it's going are on the low end of our, okay to ship window, but they are okay. If they were much lower, we may have to hold off a little bit longer, but we're gonna go ahead and pack this. So, Rocio got some pretty cool stuff. He got 2 different types of Armadillidium vulgare, the T positive, which are these guys, and the T negative, which are these guys. So they're both albinos. T positive, the T stands for tyrosinase. That's an enzyme that controls melanin production or pigmentation. So T positive, the tyrosinase is present. It is just less effective than it is on a regular Armadillidium vulgare or any Isopod, where the T negative, the tyrosinase is either completely absent or it's basically inert. So the difference is, let me slap on the macro lens real quick here so we can get a closer look. Okay, there we go. So with the macro lens on, here's your tyrosinase positive. As you can see, they have a nice golden caramel tone. That's pretty standard of tyrosinase positive type isopods. They do have some pigmentation, but it's just reduced, and that usually results in a golden, warm, caramel-like coloration, sometimes with various accents. Our Gestroid T positive will still have their classic bright yellow spots, but their base, instead of black, will be this nice, similar golden caramel color. And over here, we have our T negatives, and as you can see, these guys, their typical coloring is a off-white to a pale yellow, and it will vary, of course, by individual, but these guys pretty much lack all 98% of pigmentation. So they are the classic albino you think of when you hear the word albino. They're pretty much no color. And an interesting fact, isopods don't have red eyes. The albino types of isopods don't have red eyes like most anything else albino, because the red eyes is caused by the blood vessels. The light passing through the eye lights up those blood vessels, but isopods don't have blood. They have various enzymes that serve the same function as blood. It's just not blood like ours or of typical mammals. So that's why you see they don't really have red eyes. They'll usually have white or colorless eyes. So again, this is your tyrosinase positive. Nice golden caramel color. And here's your tyrosinase negative, T negative. Both are Armadillidium vulgare, very common species. The same one most of us can find outside in our backyard. They just won't look really cool like these. They'll be the typical black, gray, brown, earth tone colors. Some of them have some neat patterns, but these are selectively bred and isolated for the albino traits that you can see between these two various types here. So let me take this lens off. Once we're done with that. So getting back to packing. So when we pack a cup to ship, it's going to be packed fairly different than we do an expo cup. In fact, let me grab one just for demonstration purposes. So here's an Armadillidium Gestroid from our expo the other day. So when we pack cups for expos, they're basically almost like mini enclosures that we keep them in. There's a fair amount of substrate, leaf litter, moss, because in a perfect world, we'd love to sell all of them every time we go, but we take so many, that's not likely. But we always come back with some, and what we do is we just keep these guys in here, and we just kind of spruce them up a few times between the shows. If they're sitting more than, say, 3 or 4 days, just make sure to drop in a little bit of food. In fact, I always put in a little piece of carrot, so I'm just gonna give these guys a little bit of something to nibble on there. And believe it or not, these guys can do quite well in a standard 8-ounce deli cup. This is a 12 count. We've had some where if they're in there, say for a few months or more, they'll start breeding and reproducing, and we'll have to split them or basically redo the cup because it gets too full, and then they're, well, sardined in there. And out in the wild, isopods don't really need a lot of room. They don't roam around like a mountain lion or a deer. So they're actually quite happy in here, as long as they're not overcrowded and it doesn't build up with frass and things like that. So that's an expo cup. So again, deep substrate to hold on to that moisture long as possible, plenty of moss, leaf litter, a little bit of food. So a shipping cup, we're going to do different, because I know everybody has seen the videos of how any post office, UPS, FedEx, how packages get handled, whether it's just how they go through the process or whether it's just negligence where they're just being thrown, tossed, flipped, kicked, who knows. So I only put a sparing amount of dirt in the substrate for shipping, because you don't want this to get compacted to where if it gets flipped over, they're going to be buried and they can't dig themselves out, or they're just immobilized. That's very stressful for them, and if it's deep enough, that can, in a sense, suffocate them. So I will only do just a very small, just a surface, just enough to cover the bottom maybe, and then I'll just do much more moistened sphagnum moss. So I'm going to drop in probably about to where it's filled roughly 2/3. And then I'm going to grab out of our leaf litter bucket here some of the coarsely shredded leaves, or I'm just going to crush them as I drop them in. And I want to make sure some of these have some form. I don't want it to be dust. So this is a nice coarse leaf litter here. And then I'll just put the lid on. And then we're just going to do a little shake. I'm going to flip it over, let that dirt get all into the dirt. Will stick to that moss quite a bit. So that'll help with moisture retention while not creating a potential trap to where these guys, you know, in the shipping process, when they're upside down, sideways, who knows what, that the filler in here is going to allow them to move around, but it's not going to be a death trap per se. So now that we've got that shaken up, I'm just going to open it back up. I like to fluff it up a little bit. And then one of the best things for shipping, in my opinion, that I like to use in terms of building a cup is magnolia leaves. Magnolia leaves are great because unlike, let's say, a typical oak leaf, I mean, it takes very little and it just turns to nothing. I mean, it's good for them. It's great to eat, but for the purpose of shipping and what I'm trying to do, that's really not the greatest. So I like to find a leaf like this, a magnolia leaf that's got a nice little concave to it, and it'll fit in the cup. And as you can see, this is probably one I ripped in half. And what I'll do is I'll just pull some of this moss over to the side, and I'll put that leaf sort of down there and then cover it up. So what that does, they can crawl under there. That creates sort of a buffer, even with this moss, from it getting compacted and potentially creating a death trap and all that stuff we don't want to happen to our isopods while they're in transit. Because the shipping process, I mean, imagine it from their perspective. They're shoved in a box. Now, I don't think they really care so much about being in the dark. I mean, this is where they spend probably 2/3 of their life, underneath of, you know, rotting wood, rocks, whatever. But the shipping process, you know, the handling of a package going down conveyors on trucks. Again, we hope the best their packages aren't mishandled, but we just have to expect that they're going to be, or treat them like they're going to be. So we're going to take all the precautions to make sure these guys have the best chance to arrive safely. So I've got my concave magnolia leaf that creates a little bit of a buffer there. And again, this is a standard 8-ounce deli cup. So I think there's something like 6-ish inches wide, maybe 3.3 inches high. So this is a 20 count of each that our friend Rocio got. So bigger counts, I'd probably do a 12-ounce deli cup, which is the same, it's just a little bit taller, but this will be plenty sufficient for a 20 count. So what I'm gonna do, because 20's kind of pushing the limit of before I would up the cup size, I'm gonna put another magnolia leaf here. Again, just creates another little kind of space they can hide in when I put the lid on. That's also having these on the top. As you can see, what my goal is once I get this lid on is I'll give it a little test. I can shake it and everything in there is largely staying put. You've got a little bit of movement, but I've got my hides in there. I've got it. It's a firm fit, but it's not squished in there to where they have no room to move around. So, and usually having that partial magnolia leaf on the top really helps with achieving that. So next step is over here. Got my little tub of decayed wood. So I like to get some of this finely ground up stuff, some of the smaller pieces. Because again, this is what these guys eat, decayed wood, leaf litter. And I'll just do kind of a sprinkle around. So it's almost like a little bit of a snack. And I'll even like to get some of these pieces here. And because this is decayed wood, it's usually soft, or it's, you know, I can break it by hand. Worst case, I just got my little pliers here. I can just break chunks off from the bigger piece I'm working on here. And I like to do a couple pieces sort of down in here, just like in their regular enclosure where, you know, they like to sit on the wood, under the wood. So I'll just kind of nestle some pieces like that. And I'm going to top it with just a little bit more of regular leaf litter. Just kind of coarsely coarsely crush it. And something you can't see on the video, but I can just gauge it by feeling it. I want some moisture in here, of course, but I don't want it saturated to where if I were to, say, pick all this up and squeeze it, I just have water just dripping out. That's not good, but to me, this feels just a little bit dry. So I'm gonna grab my handy squirt bottle and just give it just a little bit of a spritz here. I'm not gonna like douse it, but just a little bit of a spritz here to just kind of up that moisture a little bit. And that's just something you can feel, that you can gauge, you know, with your hands. So that feels pretty good. So I'm gonna top this off. Here's a nice, another little flat, slightly concave magnolia leaf. Again, I'm looking at the top here where this comes up. When I put that lid on, I wanna make sure that if this thing gets jostled around, that everything in here is not just going to just be flopping up and down and repositioning, and again, potentially trapping our isopods, making a, you know, a potentially dangerous situation for them. We want them to arrive alive, safe, just like you do. So this is at least my method of my tedious, probably, I'll just admit it, probably slightly overthinking method. I've seen a lot of people, they just literally throw a handful of moss, even just use a wet paper towel. I mean, can it work? I mean, I'm sure it does. I just feel, my opinion, my preference, I want to send them off in something that is close to home as what they are evolved to be used to or be comfortable in. I mean, are they quote bugs, crustaceans? Yes, but their environment, even their microenvironment in this cup, affects them and how they can survive and their stress levels and all of that stuff. So having a natural as possible shipping container, in my opinion, I think minimizes that risk factor. So now that I've got it built up, oh yeah. And of course, like I did with my Gestroy here, carrots are great because carrots really don't mold. So I always like to put just a couple carrot slices in here. And sometimes when there's maybe a little bit of higher numbers, and say like a dozen, I might just drop one little shrimp pellet in there, and probably just one, because these can mold and turn nasty if it's too humid. But this is a 2-day shipment. Again, not worried about it. I don't think it'll be risking. Chances are these guys are going to probably devour most, if not all of that, before they even arrive. And lastly, I got my crushed calcium down here. I like to do just a light sprinkle, just like our Expo cups. They love to nibble on calcium. So that is basically a nice complete cup. So I'm going to just toss a lid on here, push it down, and then I'm going to gauge it. I'm just going to kind of, and again, I can feel a little bit of movement in there, which is what we want, but it's not packed so tight that these guys, when I put them in there, that they're going to be just sardined to a point they can't move anywhere, which would be stressful and potentially dangerous for them. So that, as far as how I prefer to do it, how I like to do it, and what works, seems to work for us 99% of the time, if not 100, is this kind of pack, a natural, just a very light substrate, a decent amount of moss, some mixed leaf litter, some decayed wood chunks, food, calcium, and now we are ready to add our isopods. So it's a 20 count of both. We'll just go with the T positive. They're closer, so I'm just going to lightly put these guys in here. Make sure we got them all. Yep. And I'm just going to grab the lid quickly because, yeah, sometimes they tend to scatter and disperse kind of quick. And when I put this on, I don't want to accidentally smush any of them. So there we go. So there is our 20 plus T positive albino for Rocio in New Jersey. These guys are ready to go. I'm just going to do the same thing for the other cup here. Off to the side while I continue going through the packing process. So after we get whatever cup or cups fully packed and situated like this one, we've already gauged the weather, temperatures more so, to our area and the destination area. And through that, I determine what type of box we're going to use as far as size, length, width, height. And when thinking about that, of course, we're still in that time of year where supplemental heat, 99% of the time, is probably going to be a needed thing. We use a couple different items for supplemental heat, and those come in the form of, I'll show you up here. We have uni-heat packs in the 40, 48, and 72 hour. And again, which one that we're going to use is going to vary based on the temperature forecast between our location and where it's going, and the size of the box, if there's any other things in it. It's a whole process, but in the colder months, it's usually going to get one of these, and in some cases, a cryo pack. Cryo packs are great because they stabilize the internal temperature and keep it, it's between 72 to 76 Fahrenheit, which is a sweet spot for your Isopod as far as shipping goes. It's the Goldilocks zone. It's not too hot, it's not too cold, and that keeps them in a place where they're very unlikely to expire due to overheating or freezing. So bear with me here as I'm working to just kind of slap this other cup together, and I'll show you the rest of the process. So again, I'm just going to mix all this up. Here we've got our nice mix. That very light substrate just clings to that moss. Again, even if I go to the bottom, there's a little bit there, but there's nothing that's going to, in a sense, bury them and potentially make them expire before they get to their new homes. So again, I'm going to search my little bucket here, find an ideal concave magnolia leaf. Again, magnolia leaves are great because they're thick, they're leathery, they don't just crumble like typical leaf litter. I mean, if I really squeeze this, I mean, yeah, it'll break, but it takes a lot more effort to break this and crumble it down than it does most other like typical leaf litters, red oak, live oak, Indian almond, whatever. So magnolia leaves are a tool that I really like employing for building these cups for shipping. So again, I'm just going to kind of pull some of this moss to the side. I'm going to just put that leaf in there. That's a nice full-size leaf, at least for this cup. So there's a whole little area under there that they can sort of retreat to. Oops, let's flip it back over. It's long fiber moss. And then I'm just going to pile some of that moss back on top. And again, just going to go to my little decayed wood bin and get a lot of this shake. Some of these like smaller pieces that they can sort of climb on, nest on, cling to, and just feel comfortable and more like in their natural environment while they're getting tossed every which way by the shipping service. And I will go back through if there's any comments. I'm not paying attention right now, but before I end this, I will kind of scroll back and see if anyone had any questions, comments, anything. I'll do my best to make sure I go back and catch any of those and respond if needed. So let's do a little more leaf litter there. So that, like the first one I did, that is nice. It goes just about to the top. You can see we've got all of our gaps in here to where when I put the lid on, this will be nice and secure, but it's not going to sardine them together where they're basically immobilized and can't move. So we're going to add a couple carrot chunks, one little shrimp pellet, and this one actually has decent moisture, so I don't think I'm going to need to kind of zap this one with the squirt bottle like I did the first one. A little bit of crushed calcium pieces. And now we will take our T-negative buddies, Armadillidium vulgare, and just put those guys in there like so. Make sure we got them all, yep. And there they are. And again, I'm just, oops, I think I had these lids backwards. There we go. So there's T-negative. So and that's perfect. You know, just a light shake a little bit. Everything I've packed in there it jiggles a little bit, and that's okay, but it's not so loose that it's just completely flip-flopping and rearranging itself. So again, all these little, you know, crawl spaces and whatnot, they can get down in there, they can come to the top, but the whole cup arrangement's not going to upend itself in the shipping process. So that is a decent pack. So I'll put this lid back on our T positive. So these guys are fully packed and good to go. So next step, I'm just gonna come over here to our little tape dispenser. Just get a I've already put the air holes in the cups. If you can see, I do that ahead of time. So what I like to do here is, it's kind of hard to do one-handed, sorry, is I'll tape at least 4 different places around the perimeter of the cup. These lids snap on, they're usually reliable, but in the early days of shipping and my own learning curve, didn't take long to learn you should really put some tape on there, because again, if your pack's not that great or the shipping process is just really rough, that lid can come off, and obviously that's not going to be good for anybody. So I always make sure that I am putting at least 4 pieces of tape around the perimeter on each quarter side roughly. I might add another one sometimes depending, but that lid is snapped on, it's taped, it's not going anywhere. So I'm just going to do the same thing for the other cup. Pardon my finger there. I'm just gonna tape that. Now, when we do our packs, as far as counts go, so Rocio got a 20 count. I always put whatever number plus, because we always include extras. So it's usually 5 to 10%. In some cases, like these guys, where honestly these cultures are doing quite well, I like to be a little more generous. He probably got a bit more than 5 to 10%, because, you know, again, it's great to have a lot of isopods and have them breeding and be successful, but it's easy to have too many isopods in an enclosure. So in select cases with select species and whatnot, if I can add a little bit more than the typical 5 to 10%, I always like to do that when I can. It's always better to get more than you expect in most anything in life, I think. So, all right, so these both are securely taped now. We've got our weather gauge. So next up would be the box. So with 2 8-ounce cups, typically we have a few different box sizes, but this is a 12 by 8 by 8. And because the temperatures in New Jersey, where this is going, are still a bit on the chilly side in the 30s, I am using the 1-inch thick foam versus the, where's one? This is 1-inch thick foam, and just for example's sake, this isn't really working out for me. Okay, there we go. So there's a 1/2-inch foam, if you can see the difference in thickness. So 1/2-inch, if you look at the side profile, versus 1-inch. So obviously, yeah, it's twice as thick, so that's going to insulate and hold the temperatures inside much better than a 1/2-inch will. And typically in the more mild months of the year, spring, summer before it's stupid hot, and then the early months of fall, we can usually get away with using the 1/2-inch thick stuff most of the time. But when it's still a bit in the frigid part of winter or the unbearably hot months of summer, I like to use the 1-inch stuff because it insulates better. In the hot weather, when we use the cool packs, that'll hold the cool inside much better than the 1/2-inch. Where here, obviously the heat pack, that's gonna hold the heat inside much better, where it may dissipate quickly through the sides with the 1/2-inch thick foam. So we're just gonna drop these cups down in here, and as you can see, through many year plus, at least 2 years of trial and error, I've kind of learned, you know, which boxes fit things ideally. So 2 8-ounce cups fit here with a little bit of extra space, and we want that because what we do next is we go to our craft paper box here, and bear with me, I gotta set the phone down. It's hard to do this one hand. So I'll just usually rip this into smaller pieces, and then I just stuff it around the perimeter. And when I do this, I'm filling the gaps, but I am not totally, completely filling them, because you want some airflow in here inside of the box, because the heat pack, you want the heat to be able to move around. So as I stuff this, I'm sorry this is hard to do with one hand. There we go. So I've stuffed this in a way where these cups aren't loose per se, but there's enough paper to kind of hold them in place from being jostled around. But there's also, you know, gaps and places in there where the heat pack, the warm air from that can kind of circulate around in there through the paper, the little places there, and get around to keep the cups warm. And it's honestly a balancing act, because you also don't want them to get too hot, which even in the colder months of winter, if your box is too small, or it's a very, very careful balancing act. So when I get my initial kind of stuff there to where, you know, it's enough to keep the cups where I want them without just, you know, jumbling around, I have this thicker stuff I get from Uline. It's sort of like a, I don't know how to describe it. It's like a corrugated paper, like with multi-layers, almost like a paper towel, but really not for drying your hands, but it's a similar material, just more rigid. I like to just put one of those on the top, so that will somewhat insulate them from the heat, from them getting too hot, if that makes sense. So there's that. So we've got our crumply craft paper around the bottom. I've got this thicker stuff covering the top, so the heat doesn't bear down on them and potentially overheat them and, you know, cause them to, well, arrive in a undesirable fashion. And then I have this crinkle paper I enjoy using. It's our brand colors. And there's the dog. I like to fill most of the remaining space in here with this. Sorry, and keep this on the box. Maybe just a little bit more. So I'm not gonna shove this down here and just cram it to where, again, it's just absolutely packed. It's in there, it's got form, it holds, but it's also a bit loose. So again, when I put the heat pack on, this is sort of like a buffer layers. So they'll get some warmth, but it's going to shield them from the hotter part of the heat packs. And as far as Isopod shipping goes, I know it's different with reptiles and maybe fish, but when you affix your heat packs, like this is the top, I'll put in here, I will tape this on the underside so it's on the top. You never want to put your heat packs on the bottom. You may be able to get away with putting them on the side if there's a lot of space between where your cups actually are, but I pack them in a way where we have many box sizes here. I just like keeping them on the top. Heat rises, obviously. It'll still go down in the paper to some extent to keep them warm, but it just lessens the possibility of them getting, well, for lack of better words, cooked. So one fact about these heat packs, these are not hand warmers. Never use a hand warmer for shipping live animals, because they're just not designed for that. These uni-heat packs are, they do get hot, but they only get up to 100 degrees, where hand warmers can actually get a lot hotter. And 100 degrees sounds a bit crazy, but again, this box has insulation, but it's by all means, it's not 100% sealed from the outside. It's not. And in fact, what you have to do, these actually need oxygen to work. This heat pack activates the moment I take the wrapper off and take it out of here, which I'm not going to do because, well, we're not going to ship this till tomorrow. It is 72 hours, so it is a 2-day shipment, but I like to use the 48 hour or the 72 more times than not, because if there is a potential delay with shipping, this gives them an extra day of warmth. And it's kind of like a glow stick. The first, say, 12 to 24 hours, it's going to be at peak heat. And then the next 2 to day 3, it's going to gradually be less warm. But by the time it gets to its destination, you know, it'll still be working good. I like to crack these open a couple hours before our UPS pickup arrives, because when these do first activate, they do have kind of a surge period where the heat is kind of like, it's popping, it's hot. So that gives these a chance to kind of get their initial heat spike, and then they level out really nicely. So by the time I'm taping these to the upper piece of styrofoam, the initial heat spike has already passed, and it's much less of a risk to the isopods. So again, what I do is just, this will be taken out of the package. It'll be wrapped in that same brown corrugated paper, and then I'll just run tape across it and actually poke 1 or maybe 2 small holes in the side of the box. These do need oxygen to work. So again, it's a very careful balancing act. You don't want to put big gaping holes in the box to where your heat pack's going to be ineffective and they're going to freeze out, but you do need some level of airflow to keep these heat packs working, and also to ensure it doesn't get too hot in the box. So I have a this nice little, like a, I don't know what it's, I don't know, it's some cobalt tool, but it's a nice box hole poker. So in fact, here, I don't know if I can do this one hand, but yeah, I'm not gonna be able to do it with one hand, but let me just do it and then I'll show you. So just have to kind of jab it, because that is 1-inch thick styrofoam. But there, you can see that hole there goes all the way through the styrofoam, and right there. So I'll probably do one more of those, but there's 2 nice little ventilation holes to make sure that heat pack gets the oxygen it needs to continue functioning, and also to ensure that the internal temperature of the box doesn't get too crazy hot to where it's going to potentially hurt our isopods. So after that, it's just basically administrative, more or less. Just going to put the lid on. We've got our lag paper, live arrival guarantee, as far as how well that works. And then of course I would put the invoice in there, but we're not going to really zoom in on that because personal information, respect for that. And yeah, that is more or less the long and short of how we do a package. And again, every package follows the same process to some extent. Obviously, if it's blazing hot summer, it's going to be a little bit different. If it's shipping close versus far, there may be some things that are slightly different, but overall the process is fairly on par with what I showed, with just small variables with heat packs, cool packs, foam thickness, box size, things like that. All those things can vary with each shipment based on, you know, the factors of the weather, where it's going, what our weather's like, you know, and a few others. So what I'm going to do now is just kind of scroll back and make sure if anyone had any questions, comments, or anything they wanted to throw out there, that I can have a chance to respond to that, answer, or clarify anything. So if you do have anything, please go ahead and shout it out, because if I don't see anything, I will probably be done here as far as this live goes. And okay, here's Pierre. What is the main use for the use of isopods? Well, that depends on the individual. So in my experience, there's 2 crowds. You have nerds like me who just like isopods and just think they're neat, and they collect them and they like them and they just like looking at them, enjoying them. That's one part of what isopods are for. The other one is their function as they would have in nature. They are bioactive janitors. They are a cleanup crew, or a CUC. So people that have reptiles, amphibians, you know, exotic pets, ball pythons, crested geckos, these guys are basically like little janitors. So when the animal does its, well, business, you know, it's kind of gross, but that's just how nature works. These guys will get in there and help, you know, clean that up, for lack of better words. And if it's a planted tank, you know, when you have foliage that dies off and falls, they'll eat that stuff. So they actually are a cleanup crew. They have a lot of practical use in the terrarium. There's isopods from semi-arid to tropical. There's all different kinds for all different kinds of setups. So the temperate to subtropical are probably much more common. There are some for semi-arid, but not quite as many, but there's definitely some. So again, the use of isopods is, again, nerds like me who just like them, think they're cool, enjoy them, you know, just think they're really neat. There's so many different kinds, colors, types, environments. They're just fun to keep. Or you have your other crowd who they just need a cleanup crew. They just need something, you know, when their snake, lizard, frog does its business, you know, these guys reduce that stuff. Sometimes they completely consume it. So it keeps your bioactive cleaner. It reduces the workload you have to do to keep, you know, the nasty stuff from piling up. And this is what they do in nature. They are a cleanup crew. So when an animal expires, let's say a deer in the woods, a fish on a riverbank, you know, 9 times out of 10, once it's been there for a minute, you'll find these guys all over it, you know, just chowing down. This is what they do. They're the whole circle of life, the cycle of life. So that is the purpose of isopods, one or the other, in my experience. There may be some in-betweens, but that's the best answer I got for now. The FidBiz says, I have dwarf whites in my tree frogs. Yeah, dwarf whites are great. They're also called the devil's rice because, well, they're about the size of a rice grain. And for isopod keepers, they're called the devil's rice because if they get in another isopod enclosure, they're pretty much going to overrun it and you will only have dwarf whites left. I'm just grabbing my bin here. Here's our dwarf whites. If anyone wants to see. Oops, look, I left my spoon in there from the last time I got some out. Usually there's one there. You can see it. I don't have the macro lens on, but these are little white, look like little white rice grains with legs. They breed prolifically. They're actually asexual, so they don't even have to kind of go out on a date to make replicas. So if I had put a piece of food in here earlier, these guys are just absolutely swarmers. They have a very strong feeding response, but when you're keeping other isopods, you have to be careful. Like when I got my hands in here, there's some in the food dish. But now that I've opened this and I've touched it, I will not go near another isopod bin enclosure until I have washed my hands. I have lost cultures to these things. So they are a fantastic cleanup crew for things like, you know, dart frogs. They can even be a food source, but with other isopod cultures, that's why we call them the devil's rice. And we got a really needy dog here, don't we? Don't we? Yeah. You're not an isopod, but you need love too, right? Okay. Any other questions? Comments? Anything at all? I really have to clean the tanks thanks to these guys and springtails. Yep, springtails and isopods are symbiotic. They work hand in hand. Watch out, Hayes. Watch out, watch out, watch out. Let me give you guys a quick glimpse at our Filipinadillo Cordova, which I'm going to use my other hand for. I didn't touch dwarf whites with, because this one is actually loaded with springtails right now. If you see on the food dish, again, I don't have the macro lens on, but yeah, this one is like got a springtail explosion going on. And springtails are a different animal altogether from isopods, but they live in the same environment. They don't hurt each other. They don't, you know, they're symbiotic. So the springtails are great for eating mold. If you get a mold outburst or a bloom in an enclosure, springtails love eating mold. They also help reduce fungus gnats. So, all right, well, I'm going to go ahead and jump off here. Hold up, Pierre has another. If they are they any good for compost piles, or will the heat from it be too much for them? Well, I would imagine your compost pile is going to be outside. I would say as long as they have a way to get in and out at their discretion, I don't see any harm in it. And that's the kind of stuff isopods relish. You know, decayed leaves and organic matter. They absolutely break all that kind of stuff down. So, yeah, if your compost bin is, outside against your shed or on the side of your house, I would say as long as they have an escape route. And now I would, again, suggest if you're doing something like that, use native species. Don't get something that's not from your area. Armadillium vulgaris pretty much all over the United States, or Armadillium nassatum is another common one. You can probably go out somewhere close by and flip over some logs or whatnot and probably find a nice cluster of them and just kind of relocate them to your compost bin. So, okay, well, thanks again to everybody who tuned in. I will post this to the regular page probably tomorrow. Feel free to pop in if you have any questions about, our packing, shipping, or anything I covered.